By the end of this video, you'll know how to sculpt a watering can in Fusion 360. Hey there, it's Kevin Kennedy, and welcome to the Product Design Online YouTube channel, where I demo all things Fusion 360. If you're new here, be sure to hit that red subscribe button and go ahead and comment below and let me know what you plan on using Fusion 360 for. To get started, I'm going to create a new component. I'll select the Assemble drop-down list and then select New Component. Before clicking the OK button, I'll make sure Empty Component is selected, and I'll type out Watering Can for the component name. The goal of this beginner sculpting lesson is to show you how to use the sweep and loft commands in combination with other sculpted bodies. I'll also show you how to use the bridge command in order to merge the open ends of the sculpted bodies. I'll start off by entering the Sculpt environment by clicking the purple Create Form icon in the toolbar. I'll then select the box option in the toolbar, as we'll start out by creating the main body of the watering can. I'll select the XY origin plane and then click on the center origin. As I drag out with my mouse, you'll see that we're able to type out dimensions for this sculpted box. I'm going to make the width of the box 160 millimeters. Then I'll hit the Tab key to lock the dimension in place. I'll make the length 200 millimeters, also followed by the Tab key to lock the dimension in place. After setting the length and width, you'll be able to define the height of the box. I'm going to type out 220 millimeters for the height, and I'll change the number of faces for the height section to 3. And I'll just leave the length and width at 2 faces, as it's easier to add faces later on. Then I'll click OK in the box dialog to create the box. At this point, we basically have an elongated cube, and we want to hollow it out so we can close off the bottom and create a nice flat surface where the watering can will sit on a table. I'm going to use the view cube to look at the bottom of the cube, and I'll hold down the Shift key on my keyboard as I select all 4 faces on the bottom. Then I'll simply hit the Delete key on my keyboard to delete all 4 faces. Deleting the faces not only gave us an open T-spline body, but it straightened out the bottom edge of the model. Now I want some more faces around the bottom so I can round over the bottom edge of the watering can. To do this, I'm going to double click on the bottom edge, and you'll notice that double clicking on an edge will select the edge all the way around. Then I'll right click and I'll select Edit Form. The Edit Form mode is the main feature you'll use when working with sculpted bodies. So it's extremely important that you understand what all these edit form icons do. If you're not familiar with the icons, then click that info card in the upper right hand corner and be sure to watch my video where I cover each icon. For now, I'm going to use the universal scaling icon, which is the center circle. If I just click and drag on the icon, you'll see that it scales the edge that we have selected. However, if I click undo, and this time if I hold down the Option key, or it will be the Alt key if you're on a Windows computer, and now if I drag the universal scaling icon, you'll see that it's actually creating new faces as I slide the icon towards the center of the model. I'm just going to leave the command with the new faces going about a third of the way in. I'll click the Enter key on my keyboard to confirm the changes, or you can hit the OK button in the dialog box. Then, to fill this hole, I'll use the Fill Hole command. Now your edge should still be highlighted or selected in blue, so if it's not, then be sure to double click on the edge to reselect it. I'll right click and select the Fill Hole option. At first, we get some weird results, but fortunately, we can change the hole type. I'll change the fill hole mode to the collapse option, which makes all the faces meet in the middle. I'll click OK to confirm the results. We now have the bottom of the watering can completed, so let's take a look at the top. The top is still pretty boxy as well, so one thing we could do is use the bevel command to add adjacent faces around this top edge. Before activating most of the commands in the Sculpt workspace, I like to select the edges or faces that I'm going to work with, as many of the commands will give you a preview of what's happening, but I find it often interferes with selecting the faces. The bevel command requires you to select edges, and it actually won't work with faces or points, so we'll need to select the edges all the way around the top. Because of the way these top faces converge, we can't simply double click to select all of them. However, you'll notice that you can select two at a time by double clicking. And of course, all of this I'm doing while holding down the Shift key on my keyboard. After all the edges are selected, I'll activate the Bevel Edge command from the Modify drop-down list. You'll see the bevel command gives us this green wire preview, which gives you an idea of how the bevel would be applied. In the dialog box, we can also determine the bevel location and how many segments or adjacent faces that we want to create. I'll leave this at the default of 0.5 for the bevel location and 1 for the number of segments, and I'll click OK. You'll now see that the top of the watering can body is not only rounded over more, but we also have these new adjacent faces that were just created with the bevel edge command. When working with sculpted forms, the fun part and really the benefit of sculpting is that you can play around with forms and shapes that would have been hard to recreate with parametric modeling. Looking at this model from the right side, maybe I want the top of the watering can to be a bit more curved. I'll click on one of the faces that I just created, and while holding down the Shift key on my keyboard, I'll double click on the face next to it, which selects the entire row of faces all the way around the model. Then I'll right click to activate the Edit Form feature. I'm going to drag the universal scaling icon or this center circle towards the middle, and if you want, you can type out the scale in the input field. For example, I'll type out 0.8 and you'll see the body adjusted accordingly. I like this soft rounded top, so I'll click OK in the dialog box. Let's now create the handle for our watering can. To do this, we're going to create a spline path, and then we'll create a sweep following the spline path. I'm going to toggle open the origin folder in the Fusion 360 browser. I'll right click on the YZ plane, and I'll select Create Sketch to create a new sketch in the middle of the watering can. Then, I'll activate the Fit Point Spline tool from the Sketch drop-down list, and it's located in the Spline Flyout folder. For the first point of the spline, I'm going to click where these faces meet, and I'm just going to click a few points out in space here, making the spline end at the top of the watering can. Now, in order to sweep along this path, we'll need a profile for the sweep command. I'm going to draw a circle on the end of the path, but in order to draw a circle, we'll need to create a construction plane on the path. I'll head to the Construct drop-down list and select the Plane Along Path option. I'll click on the spline. Then, you'll see if I type 0, the plane starts at one end of the spline, and if I type 1, the plane goes to the other end of the spline. Now, it really doesn't matter which end we draw this circle on, so I'll click OK. I'll right-click on the construction plane and I'll select Create Sketch. Then, on this new sketch, I'll draw a circle. I'll hit the keyboard shortcut letter C as in Charlie to activate the center circle command. I'll select the endpoint of the spline as the center point of the circle. I'll drag out with my mouse, and then I'll type out 25 millimeters for the dimension, and I'll click Enter to place the circle. Now that we have a profile shape and a path, we can use the sweep command that's located in the Create drop-down list. I'll select the circle as the profile, and I'll select the spline as the path. Once again, as you're creating any new forms in the Sculpt environment, you'll be able to control the number of faces. So I could type out 12 in the dialog box, and you'll see that increases the number of faces that I have to work with. I'll go ahead and click OK for now, and we'll take a look at cleaning up the ends of this handle so they don't run through the body of the watering can. In order to connect or bridge the handle to the body, I'm actually going to delete some faces of the handle and the body, which will give us gaps or holes to use with the bridge command. While holding down the Shift key, I'll select one of the faces that goes through the body, and then I'll double click on the one above it, which selects the entire row. I'll hit the Delete key on my keyboard, and I'll also do the same thing for the next row of faces. I also want a hole on the back of the watering can, but right now I only have these large faces, so I'll want to first add more faces. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and select the bottom 4 faces. Then I'll right-click and select the Subdivide option. The Subdivide tool lets you split faces into more faces, giving you more control over your model's contour. However, you'll notice with the Simple option selected, it's actually reshaping the back contour in a way that I don't want it to. I'll change this option to the Exact option, and then I'll click OK. Now that I have a number of faces to work with, I'll hold down the Shift key and select the inner 4 faces. And I'll hit the Delete key on my keyboard. We now have 2 holes, one on the end of the handle and one on the body, which will allow us to use the Bridge command. I'll select the Bridge command from the Modify drop-down list. Then, I'll double-click on the edge of the body hole to select the entire edge. Next, I'll double-click on the edge of the handle edge to select it. You'll see that both edges are selected in yellow. The next option in the dialog is a curve. So, if we really wanted to define how this bridge was completed, then we could reference sketch geometry such as a spline. For now, I'll simply click OK in the dialog box, and you'll see the bridge command successfully bridges the gap between the handle and the body. I'm now going to follow the same steps for the front part of the handle, except this time I'll only delete the first row of the faces. Then I'll delete 4 of the top faces. I'll activate the bridge command and select both edges. Once the edges are selected, I'll click OK to compute the bridge command. Now that the handle is complete, we'll want to create the spout of the watering can. In order to complete the spout, we'll need to set up some reference geometry, which we'll then use with the loft command. I'm going to create a plane at an angle by selecting that option from the Construct drop-down list. Then I'll select the red x-axis, and I'll type out 105 degrees, and I'll click Enter. I'll now create an offset plane off of that construction plane. I'll make that distance 150 millimeters, heading in the direction of the front of the watering can, and I'll click OK. I'll use this plane to create the first ellipse for the bottom of the spout. I'll right-click on the plane and I'll select Create Sketch. I'm going to activate the ellipse command from the Sketch drop-down list. And I'll click where the top of these taller faces converge. Then I'll make the major axes 50 millimeters and the minor axes 40 millimeters. For now, I'll stop this sketch by hitting the Stop Sketch button in the toolbar. I'm going to follow similar steps once again, creating an angled construction plane, but this time off the major axis of the first ellipse. I'll make this one 50 degrees. Then I'll create an offset plane and I'll make this one 170 millimeters. Once again, I'll activate the ellipse command from the sketch drop-down list and I'll click on the last construction plane I created as the sketch plane. I'll click to set the center point of the ellipse and I'll make the ellipse 25 millimeters in length for the major axis and 20 millimeters for the width or the minor axis. I'll stop the sketch and I'll now activate the loft command from the create drop-down list. For now, I'll turn off the construction planes by selecting the corresponding light bulb in the Fusion 360 browser so they're not in the way. Then I'm going to select the large ellipse and then the small ellipse. You'll see that gives us a nice preview of the loft, but let's go ahead and tweak some of the settings. For the smaller ellipse profile, I'm going to change the loft type to the direction option. You'll then see that brings up the takeoff weight and angle options. If I drag the blue directional arrow, that will adjust the size of the loft, or I can always type out 1.5 millimeters in the takeoff weight input field. I'll now click OK to confirm the loft results. Now we'll follow the same steps to bridge the spout as we did to the handle. I'll first delete 4 faces on the body of the watering can, then I'll activate the bridge tool. I'll select both edges as shown by the yellow highlight, and then I'll click OK to create the bridge. The last thing that we need to do is create a hole on the top of the watering can so someone can fill it with water. To do so, we'll simply delete some of the top faces. In order to select the faces faster, I'm going to head to the Select drop-down list, the Selection priority, and I'll select the Face option. Then, if I look at the selection filters, you'll see the only option is the T-spline faces. I'll also want to make sure that the Select Through option is unchecked, so I'm not accidentally selecting faces on the other side of the body. To make this even easier, I'll select the Paint Selection option. This will allow me to drag my mouse around or paint over all 12 of these top faces to quickly select them, which is much easier than holding down the Shift key and selecting each face one by one. After all 12 faces are selected, I'll hit the Delete key on my keyboard. The last thing that we need to do is thicken this body since it currently has no real thickness. I'll select the Thicken command from the Modify drop-down list. Then I'll select the body of the model if it's not automatically selected. I'll type out 3 millimeters for the thickness, and I'll change the thickness type to Soft, which will make sure that the openings of the model, such as the end of the spout and the top of the hole, have a soft rounded edge once the body is thickened. I'll now click the Finish Form icon in the toolbar to finish the sculpt body, which converts it to a solid body. To wrap up this video, I just want to point out that the emphasis of this tutorial was working with the loft, sweep, and bridge commands all within the Sculpt workspace. I encourage you to spend more time with each of them as you can really refine and better define the results. For example, I could have used a spline to make a path for the loft tool that would make the spout curved and more appealing. And of course, you can always copy sculpted bodies and really play around with the overall shape by using the Edit Form command. If you made it to the end of this video, then let me know by commenting below, and let me know if you're going to sculpt your very own watering can. If you do, feel free to share the link to your file in the comments so other members of the community can see it. As always, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this tutorial. If you've enjoyed this tutorial, please click that thumbs up icon and click on that playlist in the lower right hand corner to watch more sculpting tutorials. If you're new to the channel, be sure to click that red subscribe button and click that little bell icon to be notified of more Fusion 360 tutorials.